It's lovely to see a full house. I'm going to introduce our speaker tonight, who's Dr. Margarita Tupitsyn. Margarita Tupitsyn is a Russian-born American scholar, curator, and critic. Her books and exhibitions include Soviet Photograph, 1996, Malevich Film, 2002, Against Kandinsky, 2006, Rodchenko and Popova, Defining Constructivism, 2009, Moscow Avant-garde Art, 2017. She recently co-edited Anti-Shows, Apt Art, 1982 to 84, and edited the major publication Russian Dada, published by MIT Press in conjunction with an exhibition of the same name, which was curated by Tupitsyn at the Reina Sofia Museum in Madrid earlier this year. And this will also be the subject of her presentation tonight. Welcome.
Thank you, Clara, for inviting me, and thank you for coming. In the early 1920s, two prominent Russian critics, Abram Efros and Roman Jakobson, described the Russians as having traveled to the October Revolution of 1917 through a realization of the violence of artistic form that in the West had culminated in Marcel Duchamp's Fountain. Photographic self-portraits made independently in 1917 by Duchamp and Gustav Klutzes illustrate differences and similarities in Russian and European modernisms that in that year converged on the grounds of Dadaist revolutionary mentality. New York Dadaist Duchamp, dressed in a stylish suit and smoking his pipe leisurely, and soldier of the revolution Klutzes record themselves in an identical trick mirror composition. The external differences between Duchamp and Klutzes underline the fact that although Europeans and Russians concurred in their anti-establishment agendas, often expressed through tomfoolery, one was bourgeois nihilism and anarchism, while the other was directed, in the words of George Grosz, to the realization of revolutionary problems and connection with the workers. And of course, he is speaking about the Russians. Yet the fact that critique of culture and critique of regime found expression in compositionally matching photographs means that Dadaist tenets had begun to fertilize real politics, significantly expanding the movement's international ambitions. Taken at the first international Dada fair, a photograph of John Hartfield and Brosh holding a placard with the slogan "Art is dead, long live the new machine art of Tatlin" registered the beginning of the Dadaist fascination with Russian avant-gardists, art and politics. At the fair, Brosh also showed Tatlin-esque diagram, which despite its title dwells on his characteristic critique of the German bourgeoisie and their pervasive urban alienation. Raoul Hausmann's Since Lost Tatlin at Home was more explicitly relevant to Tatlin's ideas in its juxtaposition of a torso with its organs exposed to effect human physical vulnerability, and a modern man with his brain and eyes replaced by mechanical implants. Such views of Tatlin as an artist who, as Vladimir Mayakovsky described him to Pablo Picasso, stopped creating art for pleasing artist's own eyes, was also reflected in 1922 Lissitzky photo collage, Tatlin working on the monument to the Third International, made for Ilya Ehrenburg's 1922 book Six Tales with Easy Endings. In the photo collage, a rule is inserted in the place of Tatlin's eye, liberating it from, to cite critic Mikhail Puni, emotional irritation of the hypertrophied and damaged eye and accidental forms, and giving it an objectively truthful and real viewpoint. While Tatlin was the Dadaist fantasy of a new kind of a progressive modernist, Ivan Puni, the organizer of the seminal exhibition 010 in Petrograd in 1915, had been physically present in Berlin since the fall of 1920. Puni's exhibition at the Sturm Gallery in February 1921 put him in contact with German Dadaists associated with the gallery and its eponymous magazine, including Jean Art, Hans Richter, and Kurt Schwitters. Richter later recalled the impact of Puni's exhibition. Curiously, he writes, Dada tendencies seem to have made their first appearance in Russia, where futurist influence was still very strong. Puni's 1915 barber and window cleaner, here is illustrated in the review of 010 exhibition, are a poetic combination of simultaneous experience and original experimentation, and that's Richter still writing. His empty hunger plate is a piece of defiance that both in its directness and its form of expression can be regarded as a Dada document. And this is illustration, of course, in his book. Richter's memoir includes an illustration of hunger plate dated 1918 with Petrograd added to the title, a location that transforms this monochrome with a fixed plate into a political allegory. In Russia, he writes again, in 1918 they were in the middle of a revolution, and one potato a day was a lot. The empty plate was a challenge to something or someone. The end of the quote. A rare photograph of the lost hunger plate installed on an easel, preserved in the collection of the Mayakovsky Museum in Moscow, which I was lucky to find in this huge archive, and was most likely brought back by Mayakovsky from Germany or Paris, where Puni moved in 1924. Puni's exhibition in the Sturm impresses with the installation's inventiveness and stylistic diversity, ranging from figurative expressionism, which he practiced while teaching at the beginning of 19 at Marc Chagall's studio in Vitebsk, to non-objective crown-like compositions and geometric assemblages. Puni hung some of his framed works over walls painted with oversized Russian letters, adopted from his 1919 painting, Flight of Forms, in which he accomplished an equilibrium between visual and verbal transrational morphologies, threatened by easily decipherable communicative models such as Mayakovsky's Soviet alphabet of the same year. Puni's membership in the radical movement group formed under expressionist leadership, but including Berlin Dadaists, his friendship with formalist critic Shklovsky, whom you see here on the left, then living in Berlin, and his collaboration with Laszlo Margarita on the manifesto A Call to Elementary Art to the Artists of the World, published in the Still in October 1921, reflect his openness to multiple styles and radical politics, a typical position for most Dadaists in Russia or in Europe. Margarita had mounted an exhibition of his work at the Sturm just before Puni's. The timing, coupled with his preoccupation with non-objective art and photography, made their interest in each other certain. Margarita's subsequent telephone pictures, which he ordered over the telephone from a local factory by dictating their composition, attest to the influence through Puni, a friend of Malevich, of course, of Malevich's democratization of formal inventions through reliance on art's mechanical requisites. Puni's and Margarita's appeal to the international art community was to establish non-objective art as a platform for unification, an effort that predated the announcement of the declaration of the International Faction of Constructivists at the First International Congress of Progressive Artists, opened in May of 22 in Düsseldorf. Signed by van Doesberg, who had not yet announced his theory of elementarism, Lissitzky and Richter, signed by van Doesberg, Lissitzky and Richter, the term constructivism was a compromise between the three signatories. The term was used again at a larger gathering in Weimar in September 1922, recorded as the Congress of Constructivists and Dadaists, a combination that included many progressive artists and suggested an alliance between constructivists, non-objectivists, and Dadaists. In this well-known photograph of the Congress, Lissitzky stands out in the background thanks to his pipe and checked cap. Zara is in the front, wearing a similar cap and holding a can, while raising to his cheek the hand of his female neighbor. Perhaps this impromptu gesture, resonant with futurist eccentricity, made Lissitzky doubt Zara's potential for originality. Upon Lissitzky returned to Berlin, he told Russian artist Sergei Sharshun, who at the time was translating into Russian Zara's The Gas Heart, written in 1921, that the play had no interest for the Russians. For them, Lissitzky continues, there were a multitude of similar things before and after the war. In any way, sort of doubts the originality of Zara's Dada ideas, saying that we did it all in the futurist period. In an issue of the magazine Vech that year, Lissitzky likewise defined Dadaist tactics of negation, so reminiscent of our first futurists of the pre-war period, as anachronism. Lissitzky shared with Schwirres and Arp an investment in defining Dadaism's formal parameters. His analysis of Schwirres' exhibition at the Sturm, also printed in the magazine Vech, was initially critical. He writes, Schwirres has the brain of a literary person, but neither an eye for color nor hands for material. Together, this creates a confusing thing. Schwirres' März portfolio, printed in Hanover in 1923, simultaneous with Lissitzky's first Kästner portfolio, demonstrated in Lissitzky's terms impregnation by us, an expression he used elsewhere in relation to Macaulay-Nage's withdrawal from expressionism. Anyway, he's just trying to create this space for the Russians to be original, much more original than Europeans in their formal inventions. In Schwirres' portfolio, there is an abrupt shift, indeed, similar to Macaulay-Nage's, from structural excessiveness to precise geometrism and organization, to borrow more terms from Lissitzky. And the use of red and black, a palette characteristic of Malevich and his students. Lissitzky's execution of Schwirres and Arp's portraits in the multi-image technique of the photogram, for which he invented the neologism photopiece, mirrors the visual and technical complexity of Schwirres' März art and Arp's chance-based non-objectivity. And the Arp's portrait, of course, is given to, I think it was given to Nikolai Kharchev when Lissitzky came back from Germany to Russia in 1925. The first Russian art exhibition in Berlin opened on October 15, 1922, that is shortly after the Congress in Weimar, and as Mark Deji points out, unleashed the Russian theory of non-objective art onto the European artistic scene. The Dadaists Hartfeld, Grosch, Hausmann, and Kelsenbeck, associated with the German Revolution of 1819, welcomed the exhibition and saw in its participants ideological allies. Hausmann and Kolsenbeck's 1919 declaration, What is Dadaism and What Does It Want in Germany, reverberated with Malevich's 1918 Declaration of Human Rights in its socio-cultural radicalism and far-left ideology. Both proposed to transcend the familiar canons of modernist art movements. However, other Dadaists, such as Arp, Schwitters, Zara, and van Doesburg, were not entirely supportive of the Russian exhibition, for they disapproved of art practices that committed to one class, be it proletariat or bourgeoisie. Together, they signed a manifesto of proletarian art to refute the notion of such practice. Art made by proletarians, they wrote, does not exist because the proletarian, when he creates art, no longer remains a proletarian but becomes an artist. The end of quote. In other words, for these artists, the status of artist supersedes other commitments, and artists above all should pursue their own revolutions against artistic convention and restrictive institutions. For these, Dadaists serving the proletariat political cause would mean a loss of control over one's artistic determination and independence. Yet, regardless of some political and conceptual differences, European Dadaists and the Russians who joined them were dedicated to collective practices and the expansion of international alliances. Sergei Sharshun is the earliest example of Russian artists consistently committed to building bridges with the Dadaists. In Barcelona, where he settled in 1915, he met Arthur Cravan and Francis Picabia, witnessing the launch of the magazine 391, to which he contributed later. In Paris, and you can see his drawing on the top of the cover. In Paris, where Sharshun returned in 1920, he befriended Tsara Paul Aluard Breton, and in Berlin, where he stayed from 22 to 23 while waiting for a Russian visa, he exhibited at the Sturm after Puni and spent time with Schwitters, Ehrenburg, Lissitzky, Mayakovsky, and critic Osip Brik. From Berlin, Sharshun corresponded with Tsara, filling him in on art activities and remarking that many Russians would like to know what Dada is. So unlike Lissitzky, he sort of takes a position where he gives the Europeans predominant position, is trying to fit in, whereas Lissitzky sort of tells them that we've done everything ourselves and you can only learn from us. The first issue of Sharshun's publication, Perevos, Transportation, subtitled Transportation Dada, and issued in Berlin in 22, was a mere 4-page document that announced itself as an official agency of the Third and a Half International, and on behalf of Europe told Russia to come here. In it, Sharshun enthusiastically cites Zara and advises readers to go to Paris to see Man Ray, the creator of New Visions. And he ridicules Berlin's conservative Russian community, urging its members to exchange their passports for Soviet ones. The same problems as today. He is equally harsh and ironic towards some Russians from avant-garde circles, in particular those who could compete with him for the position of the Russian Dadaist, as he sees himself. Another important manifestation of the project to transport Dada to Russia was Brik's scrapbook, laconically annotated by critic Nikolai Kharchev as album Dada, which again Kharchev received this album probably later, after the war, before the war, from Brik, and it became his collection, part of his collection. Filled with documentation of Dadaist works, publications and related press collected during Brik's and Mayakovsky's European trips, It included photographs of the magazine 391 and Dada, of Fountain and other works by Duchamp, and of Hausmann's Tatlin at home and his ABCD. Brik's compilation of Dada photography is intertwined on some pages with his own diagrams of his own drawings and commentaries' comments, and affirming his conviction that Dadaism suited the productivist agenda of Lev that he had helped to theorize in Russia. For one of his unpublished cover designs for Lev, Rodchenko blocked the left lens of Brik's spectacles with the magazine's logotype, thus prioritizing left ideology over visual apparatuses, including those of a mechanical nature. This image of Brik creates a fascinating pair with the portrait of art taken in 1926 by an anonymous photographer who captured him with his eye obstructed by a naval monocle. The two portraits underline the difference between the far left and moderate Dadaists such as art. The latter continued to invest their creativity into optical rather than political shifts. Back in Paris, Sharshun participated in the making of Francis Picabier's 1921 Cacodelic Eye, as he later recalled, a blank canvas about 1.5 meters high with the title Cacodelic Eye scrawled at the very top, and the eye painted in the lower right part was set up in the reception hall to be filled with the signatures of fashionable celebrities. I probably surprised everyone by outlining a fat as Sharshun right underneath the eye. Then to the left of it, a vertical Sharshun Mongolian style, and underneath it all, in a descending slanted line, I put the Russian sun. The anarchist snob Picabier seemed rather perplexed by my stunt, saying, "This will get me in trouble." The end of quote. Sharshun's interaction with Paris Dadaists, that is also recorded in this group photo, laid groundwork for Ilia Zdanevich, the enfant terrible of the Russian avant-garde. He arrived in Paris in November of 1921 and initially stayed with his old collaborators and friends Mikhail Larionov, whose portrait you can see, and his wife Natalia Goncharova. Zdanevich's lecture, New Schools in Russian Poetry, delivered less than 2 weeks after his arrival, displayed his hunger for public disorder by sending invitations for the lecture to monuments of Victor Hugo and Honoré de Balzac, whose names he also included in the program. He writes, but life is unpredictable, this part of his lecture, but life is unpredictable. A postman, a contemporary guard of order, returned the letters to me because the form of the specified addresses does not correspond to the postal rules. The end of quote. Soon Zdanevich was known and respected by key Dadaists, as testified in several letters written to him in 1922 by Picabier, Tsara, Elior. Picabier's invitation to Zdanevich to visit his studio in particular is significant, for it was the center of the internationalism of Dada, in Richter's words, and the place where the Dadaists regularly met to thresh out new ideas. The degree of conceptual novelty that Zdanevich brought to such gatherings, as well as his endorsement as a Dadaist, is revealed in the writer and literary critic Andrei Germain's lecture, Ilia Zdanevich and Russian Sur-Dadaism, delivered on November 28, 1922 in Paris. By combining surrealism and Dada in his title, Germain hints at recruiting the Russians into the surrealist camp, just as the competition between the two groups was heating up. For Germain, the most significant event in Zdanevich's biography was, in his words, the wish of a despotic mother to dress him as a girl until he was 12 years old. A very beautiful girl, he added. And Clara has noticed how beautiful Zdanevich was in this photograph. Several months prior to this lecture, Zdanevich had changed his name to Ilyas with the letter E in the end, but he promptly dropped the French female ending. This was at exactly the time that Man Ray's photographs of Duchamp as Rose Solovey were becoming known in Paris. Zdanevich was familiar with Duchamp's female character. Along with Rose Solovey and Sharshun, he had signs still using Ilia Zdanevich rather than Ilyas, Tsar's Manifesto, The Bearded Heart, issued in the spring of 22. Was it then, after he became familiar with Rose Solovey, that he swiftly adopted and dropped his female alter ego, doing so as a way to establish a dialogue or a debate with Duchamp? Man Ray's photographs of Rose Solovey would have triggered in Zdanevich unpleasant childhood memories of an enforced identity, a concept Duchamp was now willingly proposing as art. Zdanevich responded to Duchamp's idea of cross-dressing and cross-naming by subverting Rose Solovey through an act of a linguistic cutting of a female ending in his new pseudonym, just as he had done with his childhood alter ego when he bravely cut off his curls. And that was his final resistance to his mother's pretending that he was a girl. Mayakovsky, Brik, Zdanevich, and Sharshun were perfect super-energetic agents for the management of international Dada. A banquet in honor of Mayakovsky, organized by the editors of the Immigrant magazine Strike on November 24, 1922, became a platform to propose such a project in the presence of guests, including Sonia Delaunay and Robert Delaunay, Goncharova, Larionov, and Sarah. The formation of a tactical group called Across followed. Its defined goal was strengthening connections between left immigrants, the like-minded in Soviet Russia, and French colleagues. Tsar's signature left in the banquet's guest book with a card pierced by an index figure, a typical sign of his, testifies to his favoring such exchanges, which he was already conducting through correspondence with Zdanevich and Sharshun. By 1923, rifts among Dadaists reached a climax in Paris, and it was becoming hard not to take sides as Sarah and Breton wrestled over leadership. Zdanevich participated in preparation of the famous Dada event, The Bearded Heart. He designed the poster for the evening as well as the cover of the only issue of the journal, The Bearded Heart, earlier published by Sarah. The well-known fight that occurred there between Breton and Sarah was a déjà vu experience reminiscent of the Russian proto-Dadaist public spectacles and scandals, some of which Zdanevich had personally instigated back in Russia. Now he was involved in organizing as a help to Tsar an event that would prove fatal for Dada. Russian urgency for transrationality, first publicly manifested in the proto-Dada production Victory Over the Sun, loudly reverberated at the Bearded Heart, where it signaled that the curtain was closing on the extraordinary adventures of Russian Dadaists in Europe. In 1913, the first issue of the magazine Surrealism in the Service of the Revolution, Breton pledged to be more politically engaged. As part of this commitment, and not without pressure from Louis Aragon, who had met Mayakovsky during his one of the last trips to Paris in 1928, printed a still from now lost 1918 film, Not for Money Born. It shows Mayakovsky dressed in an elegant suit and top hat as he teases death in true Sir Dadaist manner, an uncanny scene imagined in the post-revolutionary period and apt for publishing in the Surrealist Journal, exactly 2 months after Mayakovsky's suicide on April 14, 1930. But before this tragic event, Mayakovsky visited New York and other American cities in 1925 after being invited to show his political roster posters. In New York, Mayakovsky could see again his old friend, poet and artist David Burlyuk. Fleeing Moscow as a result of the Bolsheviks' crushing of the anarchists in 1918, he arrived in New York after a long journey by Japan and Canada on September 2, 1922. Historian Vladimir Markov describes Burlyuk as the man without whom there probably would have been no Russian futurism. Collector Catherine Dreyer's ambition to fuse European and American progressive modernists into one collective made Burlyuk's arrival in New York pivotal. Like Zdanevich and Sharshun in Paris, he was an energetic propagandist of the Russian avant-garde's theoretical and practical tenets. Burlyuk's correspondence with Malevich attests to his commitment and his swift integration into New York's avant-garde circles. He almost immediately enjoyed the fruits of collaboration with Dreyer. She and the American critic and Dada supporter Christian Breton remarked in their writings on Burlyuk's radical outfits and earring and on how his madcap personality matched his paintings. Much like Tsar, Burlyuk had an ability to enthrall his audiences. In one of his letters, Malevich revealed to Burlyuk that he had hoped to participate in and even attend the opening on November 19th of 1926 of the International Exhibition of Modern Art, assembled by Société Anonyme at the Brooklyn Museum. Unable to send his works on time, he was not included, which is unfortunate, as he would have exemplified the exhibition's concept of the fusion of progressive movements. Dadaists were represented by art, Duchamp, Schwiller's Picabia, Surrealists by Marx Ernst, and non-objectivists by Alexander Archipenko, Gabor, Mondrian, and Persner, Kandinsky, and Lissitzky. Perhaps as compensation for a lack of Malevich's works, Russian artist Konstantin Alajalov, with whom Dreyer collaborated on the design of the catalogue, placed red and black squares, Malevich's non-objective signature shapes, on the title page. In her introduction, she notes, Malevich represented here by Lissitzky with his group of the suprematists. At the International Exhibition of Modern Art, Burlyuk exhibited the paintings The Eye of God and The Coming of a Mechanical Man, which so far I have not been able to locate. Each work registered shifts between the depersonalized and the mechanical concepts that were equally associated with Russian constructivism and Dada. Here these concepts were subverted by a representation of the eye that, unlike in the case of Lissitzky's portrait of Tatlin, is stripped of all mechanical aids. But Burlyuk also responded, most likely inadvertently, to Picabia's cacodolic eye, conceived as a result of fulmic illness which Picabia had. The mass of comments that compassionate friends began to inscribe on Picabia's canvas, which he prepared, as Sharshun was describing, with the rendition of an eye turned into a collective assault on its imperfection and vulnerability, with language functioning as a remedy to visual impairment. Bourliuk's one-eye painting offered a reminder of his own ophthalmic injury. During his childhood, he had lost an eye and had since wore an ocular prosthesis. His glass eye was Bourliuk's object of epitome. He, at times, removed it to shock an opponent. Bourliuk spoke French and German, but not English, and the eye of God, I think I have to go back. And the eye of God depicts the seeing eye rather than epitome eye, revealing Bourliuk's need of visionary power due to his communicative deficiency in New York. The eye of God entered Catherine Dry's private collection, and so did the now lost Forces of Spring, populated by multiple eyes, which Bourliuk most likely executed upon his arrival in New York. Forces of Spring affected Dry so much that she displayed it in her apartment next to Duchamp and Picasso. Forces of Spring is, by means of extreme impasto, a painting that accomplishes a collage appearance that competes with such all-over collages as Schwitter's MZ460, which Dry also acquired. She asserts in her introduction to the catalogue of the International Exhibition of Modern Art the service which Soviet Russia rendered to the rest of the world has been chiefly that it scattered most of its creative and living spirits over the whole world. She then adds in a separate entry on Bourliuk, few men have so long and constantly worked for modernism as Bourliuk. Regardless of her stress on aesthetic parameters and her appreciation of the apolitical Dada of Duchamp and Van Rey, Dry's interest in the political wings of Dada, such as the German one, and her efforts to exhibit Grosch and Hartfield indicate that Bourliuk's engagement in left politics that he continued in America was not likely to affect her support. Bourliuk joined pro-Soviet groups, including the John Reed Club, lectured in workers' clubs, collaborated with the communist publishing houses, and painted Vladimir Lenin's portrait. And that's clearly very different from the paintings I have described. This 1921 caricature, Dada, showing the New York Dada group, is oddly enough relevant to the theme of Russian Dada. In it, Dada is written as Dada. The addition of the hyphen makes it a Russian double affirmation. Dry is in the picture, and so is Duchamp playing chess on the floor by himself. This Dadaist game, which had at Cabaret Voltaire in Zurich placed Tsara and Vladimir Lenin, and by extension the discourses of art and politics face to face, was now turning into Duchamp's personal obsession, shielding him from breaking the pledge to anti-art. In Russia, Vsevolod Pudovkin's film Chess Fever, released in 1925, constructs a perfect metaphor for a maniacal Dadaist mind, able to operate only at an elevated temperature that can drop as quickly as it rises. Thank you.